Every city has a sound, but not every city has a voice. Wilmington, Delaware, a small city with a big reputation for violence, found its voice in a man named Robert Edward Teat III. Most people didn't call him that though. On the streets, in the neighborhoods, in the corners where dice rolled and gunshots echoed, he was known as Bobby Dimes. He was more than just a rapper. To some, he was a legend. To others, he was a target. His life was a story of talent and tragedy, of ambition and downfall, of music and murder. And when people talk about him today, they remember two things above all: the music he made and the violence that surrounded him. The voice of Wilmington. Bobby was born on January 7th, 1985, on the east side of Wilmington. The east side wasn't an easy place to grow up. Poverty was everywhere. Violence was part of the environment. Drugs ran through families the same way rivers run through valleys. For a young kid like Bobby, survival wasn't just an idea. It was a daily mission. Like so many kids in that situation, he had run-ins with the law, drugs, guns, street fights, confrontations. He knew the system well, but he was never the kind of person who let that define him. He had ambition, he had creativity, and most importantly, he had something to say. Rap became his outlet. While other kids picked up basketballs or hustled in silence, Bobby picked up a pen and a mic. He started turning the life he saw every day into lyrics. He rapped about prison. He rapped about gun violence. He rapped about loyalty and betrayal. And when he put those words on a beat, people listened. The breakout came with Out Delaware. It wasn't just another rap track. It was a declaration. Delaware wasn't just some small state in the map anymore. It had a voice. And that voice was raw, gritty, and real. People from Wilmington felt seen. They finally had an anthem, a song that captured their reality without filters. But fame, even local fame, is complicated. Being recognized in a small city means everybody knows your name. That brings respect, but it also brings jealousy. It brings loyalty, but it also creates enemies. Bobby carried that weight everywhere he went. He was a star in Wilmington, but being a star in a city full of gun smoke is dangerous. Dice games, kingpins, and blood money. Wilmington wasn't just struggling with poverty and crime. It was also home to one of the most powerful drug traffickers in the region. His name was Brian Wilson, but in the streets, he was known as Fudel Joaquim. Wilson wasn't a small-time hustler. He was the kind of man who moved weight by the kilo: cocaine, heroin, money laundering. Prosecutors would later describe his operation as one of the most expansive in Delaware. He knew power. He knew fear. He knew how to keep his hands clean by using other people to do the dirty work. In June of 2016, everything shifted. It started at a dice game. Street dice games aren't just about money. They're about ego, reputation, and control. At one of those games, Wilson became the target of a robbery attempt. The man behind it was Artie Pratt, the nephew of another Wilmington man named Alan Cannon. The robbery went bad. Wilson felt disrespected, and in his world, disrespect was enough to spark deadly retaliation. He allegedly put a bounty on Alan Cannon's head, $10,000 to whoever got the job done. This is where Bobby's life became tangled in something bigger than music. Investigators later argued that Bobby Dimes acted as the middleman. He was the link between Brian Wilson, the drug kingpin with money to spend, and Eric Ray, a man with a reputation for pulling the trigger when others wouldn't. On June 26, 2016, Alan Cannon was shot in the head on Wilmington's east side. The city buzzed with whispers. People said Eric Ray was the shooter. People said Bobby was the one who made the connection. Cell phone records showed links. Wilson to Bobby, Bobby to Ray, but there was no direct tie between Wilson and Ray, which meant Bobby's role as the go-between was critical. Prosecutors later claimed that Bobby even bragged about it. He told people he was the one who set it up. He said he was the bridge between the kingpin and the shooter. Whether he really bragged or not, the rumor was enough to put a spotlight on him. And in Wilmington, being tied to a murder for hire isn't something you walk away from quietly. The months after the Cannon murder were heavy for Bobby. He was still making music, still living his life, but the whispers were everywhere. People knew his name was tied to something dangerous. His mother would later say that in the days leading up to his own death, he seemed paranoid. He told her about threats. He told her he felt like something was coming. On the night of November 28, 2016, Bobby left his house to walk to the store. It should have been a simple walk, just a few blocks. He was even on the phone with his mom for part of it, telling her about the fear he felt. She tried to calm him down, but eventually hung up, leaving him to finish the walk alone. At around 8:40 p.m., near the intersection of West 22nd Street and Jefferson Street, Wilmington residents heard it. Gunfire. 7 shots or more, tearing through the night air. When police arrived, they found Bobby on the ground, bleeding from wounds to the head, the arm, and the leg. Neighbors peered out their windows at the chaos. An ambulance rushed him to Christiana Hospital. Doctors worked through the night to save him, but the next day, on November 29, 2016, Bobby Dimes was gone. He was just 31 years old. For his family, the pain was deep but not unexpected. His mother knew he was under threat. For the city, it was a tragedy. The rapper who gave Wilmington a voice had been silenced by the very streets he represented. His death marked Wilmington's 21st homicide of the year. For many, it was just another statistic in a city drowning in violence. But for those who knew his music, it was a personal loss. Aftermath. In the years that followed, the story only grew darker. Brian Wilson, the kingpin who had put the bounty on Alan Cannon, was convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, on top of a 20-year federal sentence for drug trafficking. Eric Ray, the alleged triggerman, faced his own trial. The pieces came together in court. Wilson's power, Bobby's role as the connector, Ray's role as the shooter. The murder of Alan Cannon set off a chain reaction that ended with Bobby's own death months later. The irony of Bobby's life is hard to miss. His music gave Wilmington pride. His voice gave the city an anthem. But the choices he made, the ties he kept, and the codes of the streets pulled him into the same cycle of violence that took so many others. He wasn't a saint, and he wasn't a villain. He was a man of complexity, beloved for his authenticity, respected for his voice, but vulnerable to the same rules of retaliation that govern the streets. Legacy. Today, when people in Delaware talk about Bobby Dimes, they don't just talk about how he died. They talk about the music. They talk about how Out Delaware still echoes through the city. They talk about how he represented them in a world that never cared about Wilmington. But they also talk about the lesson. His story is a reminder that in cities like Wilmington, talent can rise, but it can also fall just as quickly. The line between music and murder is thin. The difference between being celebrated and being targeted can come down to one decision, one connection, one moment. Bobby Dimes gave Delaware an anthem, but his death stands as one of its most infamous tragedies, a cautionary tale of what happens when dreams and street codes collide. Because in Wilmington, the streets don't forgive. And even a voice as powerful as Bobby's couldn't escape their silence.